Hi, Dave Scotland for cgswot.com, and today we're going to do a fairly simple After Effects tutorial on a little bit of morphing from one graphic to another using some fractal noise. And we're going to be using maps in this instance, but hopefully you'll gain enough knowledge for this effect to be able to use it on images or text. Really, sky's the limit as to how you implement this particular effect. But it's just a handy alternative to get from one graphic to another, and introduce you to some of the animation principles available for fractal noise. So this is the effect here. I'll just show the RAM preview. So it's just a noise morphing from the world map to a slightly smaller area on the world map, and then even smaller again. So just to give you an indication of how you can go from one graphic to another just using some fractal noise. So very simple. We've added a bit of a grid just to make it a little more interesting to have a look at, but we'll get started. So the graphics we're going to use for this, I'm just going to get rid of that output file there, and the download file for this tutorial will include these graphics as well. And basically I've just taken some world maps off Google Image, available free of charge from a lot of different sites including NASA, and what I've done is made them just pure black and white. I've taken some of the detail out, just basically for ease. So if you live in an area on this map that is no longer on the map, please accept my apologies for wiping your country or island off the planet. We certainly didn't mean anything by it. So we've got this world map here. We've got map of Australia there, and the smaller map again is the state of Queensland within Australia. And we're going to be morphing between these three maps, but you're going to be able to use this same effect, as I said before, to go from text to images, from titles to titles. There's a number of different uses for this particular effect. So we'll get started and we'll create our first composition. And so if we just go composition, new composition, and we're just going to type in Morph, that'll be the name, and 720 by 405, just to give it a bit of a widescreen sort of feel. And I'll be working 25 frames per second over 10 seconds. So we'll go OK to that, and that gives us our blank composition down the bottom here. And we might as well drag our three pieces of footage down into our composition, and that's what we get there. They're sort of all different varying sizes. So we'll just hide the top two, and we're going to, I'll just reorganize these layers actually. I'll put the Queensland map on top, followed by the Australia, and the bottom one is the world map. And we'll just isolate the world map here, and we'll resize it down. In fact, I can right click and go transform fit to width, and that just pops it to the width and leaves the height as is, so that it doesn't squash the image. And the next one is the Australia map, and we'll just isolate it, and I'll just go transform fit to width, and that's not going to do it, so right click, transform, and fit to height, and that fits it into the image or into our resolution. And we'll do the last one is the Queensland map, and it looks like height is the one we need there, so we go transform fit to height, and that's going to be fine. So we've got our three maps there, and what we need to do is pre-comp these maps. So we'll start with the world map and just highlight the world map. We're just going to go layer, pre-compose. We want to move all attributes into the new layer. We're going to call it world map comp, and open the new composition. So we're in the new composition here now, world map comp, and what we're going to do is create a layer mask. So we just need a new layer, new solid, and we're going to make this solid, we'll leave it black, and we'll just go OK to that, and it's created a new solid for us, the same resolution as our comp, and we're going to use a luma mat of our world map. So that's in our track matting settings. If it doesn't look like this in your interface, try the toggle switch mode down the bottom, and it will go from our switches to our track mats there. Now you don't see anything in the screen, but if I click on the toggle transparent grid, you'll see that we have it punched out. Now we need to reverse that, so just change the track mat from luma mat to inverted luma mat, and that gives us just the land mass, and everywhere where there's water is now see-through. And we need to repeat that process. So what we can do is highlight the Australia map, layer, pre-compose, and we'll just make that Australia map comp. Same again, open new composition and move all attributes. And then once we're in here, we're going to go layer, new, solid, make comp size, go OK. We're going to move it down to the bottom and create a luma inverted map, and we just toggle our transparency. Now you'll see what's happened here. The map, it's the Australia map, isn't as wide as our composition. So what we need to do is bring our black solid in to the edge to make sure that we get transparency all the way out to the edge of our composition. So just highlight the black solid and just scale it in. Keep scaling it in until that black edge disappears, and that's it there. And we'll just slide that up a little bit. We'll do the same at the bottom. We're just going to slide it up slightly, about there, and that works fine. Now the last one we need to do is the Queensland map. So we'll highlight that layer, pre-compose, Queensland map comp, and open new composition, and we want to create a new solid, and we'll go OK, drag it beneath and inverted, and just toggle the transparency. Same again, just drag our bottom solid in just until we reach the edge of the landmass, and that's going to work fine. We can probably just drag it in slightly at the top, but that's going to work fine now. So we can go back to our morph, we can put on our transparency, and if we go through the eye icon over on the left hand side, we can see that the transparency is working for all of those maps. So now what we'll need to do is do a little bit of animation on the morphing, but we need to set up that morphing noise. So let's create a new solid, and we'll call this morph noise. We'll go OK to that, and it's a black solid, and the color of the solid doesn't really matter because we're going to be adding an effect. So in our effects panel, I'm going to right click and bring up noise and grain, fractal noise. Now an alternative to that is to just select effect and noise and grain, fractal noise. Same way to get two different ways to get the same result there. So the first thing we need to do is reduce our complexity down to 1, and then we're going to increase the contrast and then decrease the brightness until we get more of a hard edge on the noise. We can bring that brightness down a little bit more, bring the contrast up again. And we really want to just get that hard edge on the noise, and then we'll just go into our transform. We're going to bring the scale down, something like that. We might even just swap the noise type to a spline, just to give us some sort of more curvy shapes. But we'll leave the fractal type as a basic, and we can probably reduce the scale a little bit more still. Something like that is starting to look okay. And what we can do is take care of some evolution with a little bit of an expression. So you want to Alt click on the stopwatch for evolution, and that brings up our little expression box down here. I'm going to type in time times, we'll make it 200. And what that does is over time it's going to evolve through that noise, and that's just going to make it feel a little bit more organic. Okay, so we have our noise now, and we can move on now to just create a solid. We're just going to go layer, new, solid, and we can leave it as black. That's fine, and make comp size, and then go OK. And we're just going to drag it below the morph noise, and then we're going to track matte on the alpha. Now if I just bring up our, or inverted alpha, no, we got there, it's luma. So what we've got there is a track matte of the luma value, and I've got a feeling we could, I mean it's up to you, and it depends on what settings you've chosen for your noise, but I'm just going to invert that just so that we get a little bit more black than we do transparency. So that's working fine, and now we need to just do a little bit of animation on our contrast and brightness settings. And you'll see what will happen if I just give us a bit of real estate there. If I increase the brightness, that noise disappears. And what we want to do, I'll just undo that, we want to come in, I'm just going to give us a little bit more real estate. You want to basically increase it until it's just about gone. So we're winding up the brightness until it's just about gone, and that looks like it's fine. Looks like it's all out of screen now, and we're just going to create a keyframe, full brightness, and then if I click U on the morph noise, it'll bring up that keyframed parameter of brightness, and you can see that there's a keyframe there. And I'll come through to 1 second on the timeline. You can see that I'm at 1 second here. I'm going to create another keyframe so that it maintains that same brightness throughout that first second, and then from 1 second to 3 seconds I'll make it 4 seconds, from 1 second to 4 seconds. So come through to 4 seconds, you can see it there in the current time. We're going to create another keyframe, and now we're going to come back to roughly halfway, somewhere that looks roughly halfway between those two keyframes, and we're going to wind that brightness back down, which will create a keyframe automatically, and keep winding it until the noise completely turns to black. And that's it there. And if I just scrub through, you'll see that there's no noise. Then the noise starts to happen, and then it comes back out of that and back to no noise again. So that's going to give us all the keyframes we need. And so now what we can do is unhide our world map, and the way it should look is for 1 second we can see the world map, and then the noise comes in And when we get to that midpoint there, which is for me is at 2 seconds 09, we'll probably go a little further. I'll probably go to 2 seconds 012, which is probably a little more equidistant between those two keyframes. And then what we can do is grab the footage and drag back to that point, and you'll see now that noise comes in and then the noise comes out and the map is gone. And what we can do now with the Australia map is unhide it and drag it to that point at the start, and now what we'll get is that Australia map coming out of the noise. So the noise gobbles up the world map and then reveals the Australia map. Now we want to maintain that the Australia map there visible for 1 second, so we're at 4 seconds there, and we'll go through to 5 seconds, and we'll create another keyframe on the noise just so that it maintains that noise. And now we're going to basically grab all of the keyframes back to the second from the beginning. Let me just check that. First second, yep. So Control C copies all of those keyframes, and while we're absolutely lined up with the end of that 1 second pause on Australia, we're going to go Control V, and now we should get the noise come in again and come out, and it reveals Australia again, but that's because we need to come to this middle point here where it's all black, and we're going to drag the end of the Australia in, and then we're going to unhide or make visible our Queensland map, and we're going to drag the start of it to the end of, or to that point, and now when it comes out it's at that point. So I'll just RAM preview that, and you'll see there that the noise comes in, noise comes back out, in again and back out, and reveals at the end there. And that's going to work fine. In fact, I think what we'll do is trim our comp to that end point there, which is around about 9 seconds. So I'm just going to slide this work area bar in, right click on it, trim comp to work area, and that's going to work fine now. So we have our black and white or black and transparent masking. I think we could probably increase the size of the noise. So just highlight the morph noise, and let's just bring the scale up a little bit on it. Something like that's fine. And that's going to work nicely. Okay, so now what we can do is create our master comp, and what we're going to do is just come back out to our project tab, and we're going to grab our morph comp, and we're going to drag it onto the comp button here, and that's going to create a new composition with the morph already in it, and we're just going to hit enter, and we're going to rename it master comp. And so we're in that master comp now, and everything's working the way it should be. And what we're going to do is create a base first. So we'll just go layer, new, solid, and we'll just call it C because it's meant to represent the ocean. And we'll go OK. Black is going to be fine for this. And what we can do now is highlight our morph layer. We're going to add an effect of fractal noise. So we're just going to go noise and fractal noise, and that just gives us a little bit of detail. And we're going to make the colors, we might just reduce, we can increase the complexity a little bit, but we're just going to reduce the size down, just bring it down, something like that looks pretty good. and underneath, or the next effect on that layer will be a color correction and tint. And we'll click the white swatch. We're going to make it a sort of a reddy, little bit of orange in there, something like that, not too much orange. Bring it back to red a bit. And in the black, just play with it until you get something that you like. Still in that red spectrum. I could probably bring a bit of orange to it, just so that there's a bit of detail and it's not just a flat map. You could of course use just a flat sort of image depending on the sort of motion graphic look that you're going for. And everything's still working there nicely, where we get the morphing coming in, revealing the underlying detail. So what we can do now is put a little bit of a grid on the ocean, or underneath the land masses. So we're just going to create a new solid, and we'll just name this grid. We might change the color to white just to make it a little easier to look at in the stack here. I'm going to right click, generate, and this is in the effects panel, generate grid. And straight away we've got a grid up there. Now there's two ways to do this. You could size from width slider, where you can just slide it in, or if you want a little bit more interactive way of sort of selecting the scale, you can size from corner point, and you can just grab this corner point here and drag it in. I'm going to go for something, about that size, and I'm going to bring the border size down to just 1 pixel. And so there's our grid. A little hard to see if I zoom out, and that's just a sort of a graphics card issue rather than anything. And we want to move that layer underneath our morph layer, and I think we'll change the color. Instead of white, we're going to go for a sort of a yellowy orange, a little bit brighter. Something like that is fine, and probably give it an add, and maybe even, it's just off screen for you, but we'll go stylize and glow, and we'll give it a little bit more radius. Something like that's fine, and just hit T to bring up the opacity. We're just going to bring it, rather than play with the opacity, I think what I'll do is just reduce the border size to 0.5, and that's going to make it a little easier to, or it's not so dominant. Maybe reduce the opacity just slightly, and that's going to work fine. Okay, we'll just come in a little bit, and with the morph selected, the morph layer, I'm just going to right click and go layer styles, and it's just off screen. I can bring this up so you can see what I'm doing. So morph, layer styles, and I think what I'll do is I'll do a bevel and emboss, and straight away it's sort of giving it some embossed, raised qualities. And if we go into our bevel and emboss settings, what we can do is reduce the depth a little bit, leave it at about sort of 40, and just reduce the size a little bit, and that just gives us a nice edge around the outside, and it reads, especially when it comes to the noise, the fractal noise morph, it just reads as a nice sort of organic overlay, and really sort of stands out. So that should be fine for that, and we probably don't need any more layer styles for that. By all means, play with the layer styles to get whatever settings you're looking for, and that's going to work nicely. Okay, I'll give that a little bit of a RAM preview and we'll see what we have. So we've got our morph coming in and reveals the next map, and it reveals the next map. And I guess what we could do is make the grid a little bit more interactive. You'll see the size of the grid is, you know, Australia over here is sort of 1, 2, 3, it's about 4 grids high on the grid out at this world map resolution. So what we can do is bring up, just going to scale that in just a little bit, and we can bring up our grid settings in the effects for that layer. And we'll just go grid, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to swap it to width and height sliders and bring, or make it width slider, and just bring that width slider in a little bit just to match what we had there before. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll make it 5 is fine. That's 5 grids high. And then click the stopwatch to create a keyframe. Now we're going to come through until the entire ocean layer or sea layer is gone. And then we're going to drag that first keyframe to that point. And then we're going to come through a little bit more until the Australia is visible, and then we're going to increase the size until we get that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Still needs to go a little bit bigger. Something like that should be fine. Just eyeball it, and once you're happy with the size of it, drag that keyframe back until it's 1 keyframe past the other one, and that way it starts out here at that resolution of the grid, and then when it morphs in, it's a much smaller or larger grid. And we're going to use the same method again when we get up to here. So when it's completely gone again, and that's it there, create another keyframe and then go back in and just sort of eyeball it. It looks like, I mean, this is the Queensland area up in here, and it's sort of 3 to 3.5 grids. So come through and just increase that. I have to come in a little bit. Let's just increase that width slider. Something like that's going to be fine. And then drag it back till it's 1 keyframe. Okay, so I'll just give ourselves a little bit of real estate here, and I'll give it a RAM preview. We'll see how that's working. So we've got the grid is changing with the resolution as it should, and that's working nicely. So that's going to do us for this effect, and it really was just an introduction to some of the things you can do with the fractal noise in relation to transitioning from graphics to graphics. And it's really sky's the limit to how far you can take this particular example, the map example that we've used. You could very easily use some targeting and actually have a graphic come in and target Australia, and then it morphs, and then you can target the Queensland area, and then it morphs again. And you could also reverse the effect so that instead of, at the moment, we have sort of land masses morphing out of the ocean to gobble up the map and then go back into the ocean to reveal the next map. You could literally reverse that so that it's the ocean that is encroaching in on the land masses, and that's really quite easy to do. All you do is go back into your morph settings here, and you just reverse the effect so that the basically the land mass is transparent and the ocean is black, and that's actually quite easy to do. You just sort of reverse your settings, and you'll know you've got it right when the land masses throughout the whole animation are see-through, but the ocean is black. and then you just sort of flip the noise so that it works as well. And then when you come back out to your master comp, instead of having what have we done there? Instead of having the landmass as the overlay of the image, basically it's the water that overlays the image, and the emboss should work exactly the same way. So give that a try, have a bit of a play with that, and you'll be surprised with just how powerful that, and play with the different sorts of noise available as well. You've got quite a lot of power in that fractal noise effect, and if you play with the different sorts, you've got square blocks, and there's a number of different fractal noise types that are in that effect, and see what you get. I mean, a square blocky noise will actually give you a very sort of digital feel about it, and it might be what you're looking for. So have a bit of a play with it, and I hope you've learned a couple of valuable little tips, and that's it from me. So until next time, bye for now.